And howdy, folks. Welcome to the live stream. I'm happy with this one. I got to start exactly at 4 o'clock. Count it down to the second. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing well. I'm Pete Bickford. I am the author of ComicBase, which you might have heard of. I'm coming to you from Franklin, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. And what's all happening with everybody? Let me just get rid of an extra window here, which is going to distract me if I don't do that right now. Awesome. Anyway, cool to see you guys all here today. Today we're going to be talking about news with ComicBase, some future stuff. Honestly, what I'm going to be doing as much as anything is letting you in on some of the talk I've had with my staff in terms of where we want to go next, either in the next version that's coming up right around the corner or in versions that are a little further out down the way. And I want to get your opinion on some of these things, because some of them, honestly, it's like ideas that have come up this week, and we want to kind of test them out and see what people think. So that's one thing. Before I get to that, though, got to lay some news on folks, because, I don't think anything else is going on in life, so I figured, we make a little news of our own. First of all, the big one, you guys may know Mark Castaneda, your trustworthy support guy and production assistant and editor, a long time comic baser, is getting married to the lovely Jane, and they've been affianced for quite a while, and they're tying the knot this Saturday, so wish them both well. And they're going to be, out of the Mark will be out of the office until the 16th. The rest of us will be trying to fill in for him as best we can. So go easy on us on tech support stuff. We might be slightly delayed from usual, but we will try to keep on top of it as best we can. Managing without Mark, it's going to be hard because he's a really key part of this whole place. But anyway, congratulations to them both. It's I couldn't be happier for him. Anyway, that's the big news. Everything else pales in significance. Let me go quickly to the chat here, just make sure everything's working, folks can hear. Greg C had a question about uploading collections to the Android. I will go through that today. Greg says, hi, sunny in mid-60s. Oh, gotta make sure that the keyer is turned on here so you guys can actually see what I'm typing, what I'm clicking on. Out here in South Jersey, so great to be outside. Hope everyone's doing well. Also, talking about things he apparently picked up a copy of Origins of the DC Superheroes. I really would love to see this book. This sounds really cool. Yeah, no, tell me more about that one. I'm curious. And Greg picked up 40 issues of Del 4-Color Comics. Nice. Where do you pick up stuff like that these days? One thing that I'm increasingly puzzled by is unless there's some garage sales going on by you or something, where do you even go to find just rando comics from like the 60s anymore? The stuff that frankly used to be like the junk box, $1 and $2 stuff. Is that still a thing in anyone's neighborhood? Because or has it all been squirreled away and sold on eBay or something? I don't know anymore. Now with comic shows and things like that gone, it's been really hard just to find weird random comics anymore. Just out of curiosity, during the last week or so, I just browsed Craigslist for the Nashville area and just put in comics, saw what was out there. And it's all people wanting like $50 for a copy of Darker Image #1, like the '90s glut stuff that someone told them was really special once upon a time. And it's like, wow, okay, so no one's clearly opening up the barn and finding Grandpa's comic collection and putting it out for $1 a comic on Craigslist. But anyway, all right, so let's see here. Grace, congrats to Mark. The way you started the news about Mark, you made it sound like he was going to be leaving. No, no, he's coming back. unless the honeymoon goes terribly, but no, it's going to be great. No, it's great news for them both. They took their time, got to know each other, and he's marrying a great gal, so yeah, couldn't be happier for him. All right, so other things that are going on this week. As most of you guys know, we're pulling into the final turn before the next release of ComicBase. So I've been holding off doing anything but fairly major tweaks to the ComicBase 2020 that's been going on. Even if you guys are on like the beta channel, so you're seeing all the little tweaky updates, you notice it's actually been relatively stable for the last month or so. We haven't posted any little futsy things. I did post one this week though. It's all the way up to version 20.0.3.3830 now, up from 29. And the difference is, honestly, no reason to download this at all unless you are on a foreign system. But if you are in a system where you're using Australian dollars or Great Britain pounds or so forth, we actually found a couple of reports that were not displaying the local currency correctly. They were somehow inheriting dollar signs instead of whatever your local currency is. So that got fixed. And so if you were wondering, why is my collection displaying in dollars when I set it to pounds, that is now fixed. So go ahead and download that if it bugs you right away. If not, then no need to worry. Okay, other things that are going on. Corrections. We finally got caught up. It's been a while. By a while, I mean 2 years or so since we actually were on top of the corrections queue. You guys have been knocking us dead, as to sending in just incredible amounts of corrections. Certain names that are on our leaderboard that have like 600,000 points to their name, you know who you are. But when you do things like posting all the cover dates or all the appearances for like the entire run of Dandy Comics, from England or something like that, even if it's just a one note, okay, yeah, it was printed in, July 5th, 1951, right, got it, check. For our editors just to even click through and say, yeah, got it, to all those corrections, for things like that, it took just an enormous amount of time. We did some back-end work in correction handling where I basically was forced to do corrections myself, and so whenever I see something that's kind of annoying when you're getting large amounts of them, I was able to throw some programming foo at some of these things to make them go faster, and we managed, it seems like, to turn the tide on getting on top of the queue. So we actually zeroed it out for the first time in forever. Like I say, probably about 2 weeks, last Friday. So you guys have also probably seen that we had an enormous amount of new data hit ComicBase in the last couple updates. Just to give you the rough stats on that, let me see. Yes. So last week there were 833 new issues, 14,737 issue updates, 769 new pictures to go with the 1,573 pictures from the week before and the 3,046 new pictures from the week before that. So if I got my thing working, I should be able to queue up the graphics for that. Is this week's update for the update that was just posted moments before the broadcast. We are going live with the update on Wednesday because Mark needs to be out of town getting married. And so that is what's coming down this week. 2,866 new price and issue updates, almost 2,000 new covers added. This is just psychotic, and we also cracked 20,000 magazines in total on the whole thing. Yeah, it's good job to all the editors and everybody who corrected, who added in data and gave us corrections and things like that. This is just a staggering amount of data that we've been pushing through here. When we first even came up with the brag box, which is what we call this guy. It's honestly, it's modeled after the little scorecard that used to be at the top of 2000 AD. But when we first came up with this format, it was rare to see a 4-digit number in the whole corrections on this thing. If we ever said that, oh yeah, man, we pushed 500 issue updates, that was a huge week for us. Now the idea that we would move 15,000 issue updates in a single week is getting to be something it's not even in the top 5 anymore in terms of like how big the week is, but we have pushed incredible amounts of data lately. So thank you everyone who added to that one. We could not be doing this without you. As much as we think we know about comic books in-house here, all of you put together know far more, and all we can do is take our hats off to everyone who contributed their knowledge and helped us make all that happen. All right, other stuff that's going on. So speaking of corrections, this is a personal plea to everyone who submits cover pictures. If you possibly can, please crop your photos, which is to say, take the comic and make sure that the image you give us is cropped to all four corners. You're not showing extra bits of scanner, or scanner bed off to the side. You don't have, the thing tilted, 20 degrees this way so that, we're looking at half the cover sliced off and everything. It's not that we don't appreciate any picture of things we don't have, but it does add up to a lot of work for our guys to try to sort of squish all this stuff into the right format so it looks nice. And there's some things that are coming in the next version of ComicBase, excuse me, for archive users in particular, where it's going to look really, really nice if everyone's putting in cropped covers. Now, one thing we did is we totaled up how many covers we have in total, and I believe the number was, let me see if I can pull up that graphic for myself here again for just a second. That would be, yes, 685,646 total covers. So doing a little bit of quick math on that one, getting out the calculator. Okay, so 685,646 divided by 60 seconds in every minute, divided by 60 minutes in every hour, divided by 24 hours in a day, gives you, and here's the fun part, 7.93 days of, if you took 1 second to look at every cover in ComicBase, and all you did with your eyes, pressed open like the guy in Clockwork Orange, you never slept, you did nothing, but every second it just auto-advance to the next cover. Yeah, it would take well over a week in order to just even see them all. So with that in mind, imagine that our photo editors have to go and try to fix your cropping on any proportion of those ones. We can't do it in 1 second. It takes us several seconds to try to do this. So please, if you possibly can, submit cropped photos, because it just helps everyone. Now, we did try to automate the process from our end as much as is humanly possible, and we actually hired not one but two specialized graphic image programmers to attempt the process of taking a comic book that may or may not have been properly cropped down against its background, whether it was a white background or a black background, or maybe that kind of like weird gray background you get if you've left the scanner bed open as you scan a comic. As it turned out, we frustrated two pretty heavy-duty graphics programmers. Neither one of them was able to come up with a completely satisfactory solution to automate the process all that much. The second guy did better than the first. The first guy, I think, just went crazy and ran off into the bushes, talking to himself. But the second guy worked his butt off, trying to tweak the whole thing into shape, and was able to get us at least an attempt at the crop, and then give us controls to tweak it, to make it faster, to crop it down to size. Even then, best case, we're looking at 20-30 seconds per image to try to fix these guys. So that's what we're trying to do to kind of get the thing under control. That being said, I haven't got a guy I can just devote a month of their time to do nothing but cropping photos. So anyway, please, we're doing what we can. It's an ongoing process, but anything you can do to give us tightly cropped photos, much appreciated. And while you're at it, also appreciate it when we're talking about scanning things. If you could scan things, do them at 300 DPI. And just give us the full-sized cover. Save it at the maximum quality if you like, as a JPEG. And that is going to give us the maximum best possible image that we can serve up to 4K users for, looking just gorgeous on your new 4K monitors. And that will give us really the best way to serve all those up. And we'll slice them down to deliver all the little tiny thumbnail sizes and everything else that we need to do to make all the reports work. We'll take it from there. But, just go ahead and scan things full size, submit that to us, and we'll take it, we'll take the rest of it. Okay. So, let me check. Is there anything up in the chat? So, let's see. Talking with my Mike Beam says, talking with my guy. I like comics in Vancouver, Washington. He just got 210,000 comics. Wow, where did those come from? That's awesome. Andre says, hi, congrats to Mark. And how much longer until a total of 1 million in the master database? Great question. So for, I don't know, so the product is called ComicBase, And so even though we're now tracking books and magazines, if we were lumping in the books and the magazines into it, we would have added something like 55,000 items this year. But we're only tracking, we're in the total that we brag publicly about, with the over X many items, we only talk about the comics right now. So the rate we're going, year and a half, 2 years maybe, before we hit 1 million. But on the other hand, if people like Bob Wood keep on annihilating us with new stuff, who knows? Or we could change our mind on newsstand variations not being an official thing, just because it had a barcode instead of not, and instantly get ourselves about 50,000 new, entries into the database. So that would put us a long way toward there. I just don't want to go down there if I don't need to. But anyway, we'll keep you posted on that. And you said, oh, we got them from a comic shop that went out of business. It's funny. That's if you guys know Torpedo Comics out in Las Vegas, that was their entire business model. I think they're still going. Is they would buy up comic stores that went out of business for just pennies on the pound, if it was even pennies, multiple, but literally, like car garages, like aircraft hangars out in the desert storing comic books is how much material they had, especially graphic novels. Stunning amounts of stuff. They were, as you guys might have heard from a previous show, they were the guys who had to call me up one day and say, yeah, I've got a problem. Right now you're limiting us to 32,767 copies of an individual item. And I'm like, how is that a problem? Well, for Spawn versus Batman, it was a number like 40,000 copies of it. And so the answer at the time, this around ComicBase, I don't know, 13 or 14 or something, was, well, I guess dupe the issue and put the other 7,000 copies in a second line. But we actually, because of Torpedo Comics, had to change the type that we use for tracking how many copies you have of something from a standard integer to a long integer. So now I guess at this point, if you have up to something like 4 billion copies of something, we can store it in the quantity field. So no more worries for that one. But anyway, that's a thing. All right. Yeah, tell them to get ComicBase. Yes, they actually had that. Oh yes, and tell your comic shop to get ComicBase too. Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, if he's a retailer, we even offer quantity discounts if he wants to sell them in his store. So okay, so let's talk about other stuff. So I talked a little bit about the auto cropping issue that we're facing. Now I kind of resolved that I'm not going to talk all that much explicitly about Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace is the next version of ComicBase. It's dropping really, really soon. I'll tell you the date when we're physically shipping it, but it's really, really soon. Like I say, we are pulling into the final turn on this one. Those numbers I gave you on the brag box quite likely will be the numbers that it ships with. Anyway, there's lots of new stuff in it. Particularly, the focus on this new release is particularly reports and analysis tools for tracking the value of your collection as really as an investment. We started tiptoeing into the space with the idea of price checks and things like that. We're really taking more ownership of making sure that we're treating your comics very seriously as an investment tool. And when things are getting off, we do have the power to just grind the market to give you guide prices and so forth. But one thing we've always known is that even with 2.1 million data points analyzed every week to give you rolling rolling guide prices on everything, weird stuff does pop up in terms of just pricing flukes and such. So one thing we did last time out with ComicBase 2020 is we added the price check feature, where you can call out to us anything that seems just weird. Some guy who is the only copy of something priced it way too high, way too low, or whatever else, and it doesn't seem indicative of the overall price of the market, or there was a fluky sale that just on a comic that doesn't have much data behind it happened to drive the comic out of its normal price tranche. We have taken more ownership of the idea that, okay, in certain circumstances, we will actually do a separate investigation of pricing for a comic book using other sources and going wider than we normally would to try to figure out the pricing on it. That was the price checks feature. That's in the ComicBase you're using right now. There are other things we're doing going forward. But we're also in Crystal Palace, the next version. We're also giving you more tools to just every week as updates change the value of your collection and so forth, really see how that's playing out. See what your top gainers are, see what went up, see what went down, see what the value of your collection changed on a week by week basis, and also go back historically and see how it's been changing over time, both in terms of the quantity and the rest of it. It's some pretty cool stuff. I'm going to look forward to showing it to you in a kind of a release video when that comes out, because we're getting pretty release video heavy these days. So I think when it does actually ship, we'll be doing some how-to videos of all the new stuff on it, not just throwing a what's new out on the web page and asking you to read it all. We'll lead you through all that stuff and have special tutorial videos as well. But we'll talk about the features on that a little bit more in the future. But another thing, in addition to all the analysis and reporting type things that are coming along with Crystal Palace, a lot of just quality of life things, just things to make little things in ComicBase better. For instance, just it sounds like a little thing, but it makes a big difference. Is just updates are better. When we drop a new update, 20.0.3 or 20.0.4, things like that, in the future, and this is something we talked about on a previous podcast way back. It now does a much better job of letting you know instantly, hey, there's a new thing out here. You click one or two buttons and boom, you are updated. Everything, it's much more like updating a web browser than updating any version of ComicBase you ever ran in the past. Also we're making this so they're much more lightweight. So when you first install ComicBase, it installs all the things that don't change a lot but are very heavy in terms of their size, like the main database, the main graphics, and so forth. And then the updates for the program are very, very lightweight, so you can update them really in just a couple of seconds, when you're actually rolling them. So stuff like that, a lot of things like that have come along with the new version, and we hope you really enjoy the new stuff. So like I say, we'll show you that stuff more when it comes out, and I can just point to pictures of it. What I want to talk about in terms of this particular live stream is I want to talk about some things that they're more directional, but we're not necessarily there yet. Well, or maybe we're there, but maybe we want to maybe even go further than we're taking it. So let me give you some overviews, and on some of this I want to tell you what's going on, but at the same time I don't want to spoil some surprises. So I'll try to hit the balance. If you ask pointed questions, I will likely give more details, but let me save a few things for later on. But let's get into it. All right, so first of all, we're embracing downloading in a big way. This is something you've seen in previous live streams where we talked to people a lot about how they prefer to get deliveries of their products and so forth. I think we're coming to the point now where it's getting very hard to do what we need to do within the limits of the physical media. So even when you're talking about 4 DVDs for the archive edition, for instance, it's really hard to deliver 685,000 covers at any kind of resolution that makes any kind of sense. One thing that we've always attempted to do with comic books, so a modern comic book by convention is about 10¼ inches tall. At 96 DPI, it winds up being something like 1,050 pixels. That's what we've used as kind of our basic standard for the images that we use on the archive editions. Well, if you take 1,050 pixels wide by 700 and however change, wide a typical comic book is, and you multiply just the number of pixels by 685,000 images. Now, some covers are bigger, some are smaller, some things like that, but that's kind of where we're aiming at. Pretty soon you realize that you're talking about a very, very large number of pixels, and no matter how ingeniously you use JPEG and every other kind of compression to get them down onto a disk and everything, you're winding up sacrificing a fair amount of quality to squish them onto the size that would fit on even 4 DVDs. And we've looked into this before, and it's a real headache for us because we can't really go higher than 4 DVDs. It doesn't make any sense. It's just a chore to install. We have started out almost a decade ago now, I think, with the idea of shipping on Blu-ray. And Blu-ray, during the early years of things like the Xbox One and stuff like that, was a very promising medium, but it's kind of stalled. I mean, it just as a physical medium, the world has changed in a way that it's really gone so that, with the exception of things like 4K Ultra, UHD Blu-rays and things like that, you're rarely seeing a lot of content, delivered. Well, I'll put it this way: most physical content or most digital content that you are consuming these days doesn't come to you on discs. It comes via high-res Netflix streams, or it comes via your Comcast providers, streaming 4K content to you, or whatever the thing is there. So if you just count the bits in your life, most of them didn't come from going to the store, buying a Blu-ray, and sticking it in your Xbox to play. We're getting into the same situation where we have so many bytes of data to give you, and we want to deliver them to you in a content format that gives it to you, where the images look great. We don't want to just compress the heck out of them so that they look like garbage. But we're hitting we're hitting some limits in terms of how much physical media we can give to you, in any kind of reasonable way, both from that it doesn't cost us a fortune to deliver it to you, and also that it doesn't take you 7 hours to download the whole dang thing or install it on your machine. So going forward, what we're doing in a pretty big way is embracing digital delivery of more and more things. We're still going to be offering physical delivery of items, but more and more we're moving towards kind of a digital first push of everything. So just think that the default way that I think most of our customers are going to get comic-based content is going to be by downloading it. Maybe start by installing the initial program or whatever else from physical disks, if you prefer to do it that way. But if you actually count the bytes up and down the stream from that point on, I think you'd find out that most of them came down from your internet connection by a long chalk. So to that end, a couple of things. One is we've turned off the watermarking that used to be part of the deal with Atomic Avenue for serving up archive editions. So it used to be anytime you download an image from the servers, it would always come with a small, very, very faint, but if you look for it, you can see it, Atomic Avenue watermark. If you're an archive user right now and you download anything, it's going to come down as a clear image. It's also going to come down as a lesser compressed image than we would ever have been able to fit onto the discs themselves. So if you're looking at just the quality of the JPEG image itself, at this point, the downloaded image is going to be better than the one we can give you on the disc. Now, for most images, it doesn't make a big difference. But if you see how JPEG, which is the format that people use to compress photographic style images, JPEG is what is called a lossy compression algorithm, which means that if I take an original image and I compress it down and then I decompress it again, what I get back when I decompress it isn't exactly the same as the original thing that was compressed. It took some shortcuts, much the same way that MP3 takes some shortcuts with how you hear notes, where it doesn't deliver as detailed of an audio experience for you as, say, an AIFF file or an Apple lossless file. MP3s take advantage of the idea that if you have a loud sound of a certain frequency playing with a similar frequency putting out a softer sound, it's very likely that the loud sound will mask the softer sound. So you could just drop out the softer sound and no one will ever know. But there's various characteristics of that they use to get away with murder. I mean, MP3s will typically compress down your audio files by 20 to 1 or more. JPEG similarly will compress down your visual files by taking advantage of the fact that the human eye has a hard time seeing really small color differences on really small groups of pixels. So if I have let's say I have 8,000 possible shades of red that the human eye could that I might be able to represent using colors. Well, if 2 pixels are right next to each other and they're, I don't know, 5/8,000ths apart from each other in terms of the shade of red, you can very easily, and they do this not in blocks of 2, but they do them in blocks of 9 or so. You can very easily unite all 9 of those pixels under one color, color it the same thing, and it will, to the most people's eyes, you'll never notice the difference. Now, the problem comes when you dial up the algorithm. and you start using larger and larger blocks of pixels and lesser and lesser gradations in order to get the most compression out of them. Eventually, you get what's it looks like a blotching effect, and you see this very much when you have large flat fields of color that are next to another color that's wildly different from it. So thinking about the corner box in a comic book with, say, the price label, where you've got like a white box next to a black box, and so or other times if you have gradients, so a cover of Swamp Thing where it goes from dark greens subtly all the way down to orangey lighter greens on one side, you'll see that they get clumpy as you dial down the compression, and it's not a great look. Well, what will happen is when you download images from ComicBase.com or just from within ComicBase, we're able to give you a lesser compressed image than we would have had to do if you were just downloading the image off the disk itself. So as a result, the image will just look a little better. Now, in many cases, if you're just looking at it quickly, you never spot the difference. If you're printing it on something, you never spot the difference. But if you're looking at it and saying, look, I want a really pretty copy of this cover, then you'll definitely spot the difference in terms of like how nice the newer ones look. Anyway, this long digression here is all just to say, as effective as of a couple of weeks ago, anything you download off ComicBase.com using the archive edition is always going to come in at a pretty great, fairly loosely compressed image ratio, served up in JPEG format at the full resolution that we've got to give you up to 1050, which is our target for a 10-inch tall comic book. And that's going to be a thing going forward. So, and with no watermarks or other or other things that are visible that tag it in any way, degrading from the image, which is a very long way of saying, if you want the best looking covers, basically what you really want to do is download them. So how do you do that? Now, there's a couple ways. One is if you start by just initially downloading the covers that came with ComicBase. That'll give you the full set. Those are not watermarked, the ones that you download as part of the main thing. If you then have Sidekick automatically download cover art on a weekly basis, every single time we push new covers, you'll get the new cover downloaded as part of everything, and just let Sidekick run every week, and you'll always be up to date with all the latest stuff. Or, if you ever miss anything like that, just take them in ComicBase, highlight along the left-hand side, right-click, say Download Covers, and you'll get the nicest version that we've got. That applies to all versions of ComicBase Archive Edition 2020, starting now, and going forward, we intend to keep that up. Okay, let me do a quick check, because I've been babbling for a while, of chat before we get on to other things. How much space does 210,000 comics take up? I can give you some ideas, because I have about 60,000 comics in my garage. If you stack them 5 boxes tall in drawer boxes, drawer boxes are a type of box made by the Collection Drawer Company where you can take the comic boxes and stack them on top of each other, about 5 tall. But there's a shell that goes around each one of these boxes, which allows you then to pull out any comic in the stack as if it was like a file drawer. So you don't need to physically rearrange comic book boxes to get to the ones at the bottom. Well, if you take, so I have 310 drawer boxes, which house 62,000 comics. That was as big as my collection ever got. So I think you're looking at basically the equivalent of 1,000 drawer boxes to hold the whole thing comfortably. A comic box takes about 11 inches wide by what does it wind up being? About I think it's about 11 and a half inches tall by 10 inches wide, and that's not 10 inches wide, about 9 inches wide. Do the math, and I think basically you could get the whole thing into a 3-car garage. But it would take a 3-car garage, arranged library style, where you have back-to-back comic boxes down the center columns. Spaced far enough apart that you could pull them out from either side and stand behind them, which winds up being, I think, something like 5 feet. Not that I use those exact things to lay out my own garage. So, anyway. He says about 520 long boxes. That sounds low to me. 210,000. So typically think about 200 comics per box. I'm still going to stick with my 1,000 box, estimate there. Apologies to Mike. In a warehouse, yes. Okay, so let's see here. When will it be available? I assume you're talking about Crystal Palace. I'm going to announce it shortly, but I tend not to announce things until they're literally shipping like that day. So real soon. And by the way, in case anyone's watching this one and wonders, the deal with ComicBase, as always, is if you have an active subscription, so if your content subscription is active, it's also the program subscription. So, you're going to get it automatically. Just one day you'll get an email that says, hey, it's out. There will magically have appeared a new ComicBase serial number for the new version in your account. And when you launch ComicBase, we're very much hoping that we can make it so it automatically says, there's a new version available, do you want to install it? And it just updates your program, carries over your database, and does the whole thing in a minute or so. So that's very much the experience we're trying to do this time out. Just make an automatic update on the program side. We have a lot of testing before we push that as an automatic update. Worst case is we just tell you, hey, the new version's out, go download it. But we're trying to make this one as smooth as humanly possible. But it's coming real soon. All right. 1/3. Is anyone monitoring the Atomic Avenue message boards? I don't know. That's a question for the Atomic Avenue guys, but I will certainly forward it on to them. It's a thread. 1 of 323. No, the ComicBase boards have much more activity regularly checked. There's been some questions posted over the last couple of months. No official responses posted for some time. I will send a note over to the Atomic Avenue people and ask them what their policy on that is. I don't know. I tend to stick. Yeah, we work with the Atomic Avenue guys, but I tend to stick personally, other than selling on Atomic Avenue, I mostly get concerned with the ComicBase side of things and the interface to Atomic Avenue. I don't get involved with the day-to-day running of Atomic Avenue, but I will certainly message them and ask. All right. No official responses posted sometime. Okay. Andre says, all for download, have you looked at 64 SD cards for shipping? I have. It doesn't work out. It's not economical unless we have a very elaborate pricing shipping model. You can find you can find I could do it as a specialty thing, is like a one-off to ship, say, a Blu-ray edition of ComicBase. I could ship it. So a Blu-ray, if we look at just the raw cost of the disc and the printing and the packaging, whatever else, it winds up being, in the kind of quantities we work through, couple $3, think in terms of the raw package, and then another however much for the actual shipping, right? Which if you're shipping it to Turkey is like $17. Anyway, what you mostly do if you switch it to like a USB stick or something like that is you mostly up your cost by about $5 in terms of getting it out there. One problem we've got as well is you need to kind of separately vet the USB vendors, I found. It isn't like buying blank media, because one problem with USB sticks or memory cards in particular is if we simply just say, hey, these guys over in China are selling very cheap ones, if we don't separately vet and test them and go at them at a fairly low level, we have seen personally things where the BIOS drivers in USB sticks have installed, driver level viruses on affected machines, and there's no way in hell we're getting involved with that. So obviously you can solve a lot of that problem by buying higher-end brand names like SanDisk, things like that, which you would then reuse multiple times. But like the one-shot throwaway distribution ones you get, you got to be careful. Decent for things like trade shows as a throwaway, but yeah, mostly all it does is run up the costs. It doesn't seem to solve anything. Is my take. Scott says, all for downloading software, vastly prefer physical Blu-rays for movies. I do as well, primarily because two things. One is if I'm owning a particular movie, I'm trying to buy the best possible copy I can get for it. And what's happening with things like streaming of 4K content, things like that. Like if I love a movie enough to spend $15-20 to actually buy a copy of it, that means it's one of my favorite movies. I want the nicest possible copy I can get, and I want it degraded by as little foo as possible. So if I order it as a digital download off Vudu or something like that, it's always going to be at the mercy of what they feel like ratcheting the stream at. And typically, if you look at the actual stream of how much data they're throwing down the pipe at you versus the native stream that they would give you if you're just streaming it off of like an Xbox, they're throttling the living daylights out of some of these ones. They're promising, oh look, it's a 4K movie, but they're not telling you it's a 4K movie that's been compressed to death. And so if you actually pause your the stream and you actually look at like the shadow detail and things like that, a lot of them just look like garbage. And there's no way that you can control that as a consumer. So you can, yeah, I mean, it's always going to be at the mercy of whoever's serving it to you, whether it's Netflix or Vudu or whoever else. So I guess if I ever care enough to buy the movie, I generally care enough to buy it on Blu-ray. The other thing I like about it is on Blu-ray, nobody can just disappear your content on you because they decided it became, they lost the license to it, it became politically inconvenient, whatever the thing is. I mean, the last thing I need, if I cared enough about Gone with the Wind to buy a copy, I don't want it to magically go away from my library because someone threw a hissy fit, and I don't want to come back with a big disclaimer over the whole thing saying, well, this represents a state of America that's different than the current state. Yeah, you think? But no, it's, yeah, I definitely prefer physical copies of all my digital media that way. When we're talking about delivering digital copies of as a download for ComicBase, honestly, I do not care if once you've downloaded it to your machine, it's on your machine in the same format we have it. I'm just talking about how to get you the nicest copy of it that I can get without bottlenecking the whole thing through a disc. We've got the opposite problem that Blu-ray has when it's streamed. Blu-ray has way more data on the disc, and then it gets squished into a little pipe, to give to you if they're, if they're pushing a movie over Netflix. We have the problem where the Blu-ray disc is nowhere big enough, or the archive is nowhere big enough, but the stream we can give you off of a server is big enough, and so we just want to give you the nicest possible copy. All right, and Mike also agrees about the physical discs. Will the preliminary art watermark still be on those? No, the preliminary art watermark. Yes, the preliminary art watermark is there just to tell you that this isn't the real cover, because it's not the real cover. It's so what he's talking about there is there's a set of images we get provided by the publishers, typically through Diamond Comic Distribution or UCS or whoever else. And what that's done is it's typically temporary artwork they use to advertise an upcoming release, but it may or may not be the same as the actual release. So in order to warn you that this thing you're looking at in ComicBase isn't actually a picture of the comic book, there's a watermark we use along the side of the comic. I think it's over on the left-hand side of it, which says preliminary artwork. And it's to just warn you this is not necessarily the real thing. And as soon as we have the real thing, we overwrite that that download with the real one as soon as the real picture shows up. So yeah, we do intend to keep on labeling the preliminary ones as preliminary because they're not the real thing. All right, so let's see here. Long bosses. Want to do it once you get shipping would be cool. Let's get to that one in a bit. Yeah, so all right, so we talked about 4K, and I'm sorry, we talked about digital. Oh, sorry, let me wrap up one thing. So I talked about we really want to embrace digital first. So some of the things that means is we're also going to be supporting different types of digital content inside ComicBase. So you guys may know, for instance, that we offer the ability to track your PDFs of comic books, or CBR files, or CBZ files and so forth, or even movies and so forth. You can actually just drag them on top of the relevant issue in ComicBase, and you'll get a little media icon. It'll appear next to it. You just click on there and be viewing the original, the original comic book or the original movie or what movie trailer, whatever you have it, right in ComicBase. So we have the ability to do that. Another thing we slipped in just recently is we slipped in explicitly ebook as a binding type for books. So in other words, we talked about this last time, we have the ability now to let you track books that were only ever published as an ebook, which includes an enormous amount of technical literature, but there was a guy who was submitting a lot of, like, say, Warhammer player manuals, which I guess they put out as ebooks and so forth. We're adding other types of this as well. I guess, for instance, there are protected PDFs that the Avon Gemstone is using now to deliver the Overstreet Comic Price Guide. You'll be able to access those from within ComicBase, and some other types of media as well. That's going to be something we do. Now, going forward, remember I talked about how Blu-ray used to be like just the thing, right? Right up until physical media more or less stalled out. So if you buy like a hot computer these days, every chance in the world it doesn't even have a drive. The next edition of PS5s and Xboxes and so forth, both are coming with a lower end edition that doesn't even have a drive to stick the disc in. This is getting to be a real reality for people, and we take at least once or twice a week the call says, hey, love the archive, can I get it without the discs? Yeah, of course you can. You can just download the whole thing, but that's, it's becoming a real messaging issue for us, and same thing goes for Blu-rays. So what we're looking at doing is, and I'd like your feedback on this, because we haven't pulled the trigger on this yet, but we're pretty sure we're going to. You guys may know that we do two different versions of the archive edition. We do a regular archive edition, which ships on four at this point DVDs. It used to ship on 2 when we started, and then it became 2 dual-layer DVDs. Then it was 3, and now it's 4. We're not going more than 4. 4 is the end. But anyway, so in order to keep the quality level up, we started with the idea of a Blu-ray, which now ships on a 50 gig Blu-ray. But the one thing that's also interesting about the Blu-ray is we also ship quarterly updates on Blu-ray. I think we started doing this at the beginning just to differentiate the product from the DVD version, and also to get really cater to an audience of people who just want to have the whole art library constantly updated once in a quarter. Problem is, it takes when we first did, I think we had like 8 customers for it or something like that. We have a lot more than 8 now. It takes days to get the production runs every quarter ready for the quarterly distribution of the Blu-rays, and then just cart upon cart to the to the mail guys and so forth like that. It's a real deal to push out the quarterly updates on these ones. I think we're going to stop doing it. I think what we're going to be doing going forward is we're going to stop offering the Blu-ray as a quarterly update product. I think the plan at this point is we're going to rebrand the Blu-ray Archive Edition as the 4K Archive Edition, where what it will do is, just like the Archive Edition right now will allow you to download full-sized images with no watermark, the 4K Archive Edition will allow you to download up to a 4K image with no watermark, and also at the best quality we can give you. But we'll deliver it initially on a Blu-ray to you. But the idea is that going forward, as you go throughout the year, what you'll be doing through Sidekick and ComicBase is you'll be downloading the higher res, things in real time as you go, and we don't try to ship you a disc 4 times a year to keep the whole thing up. Now, as a result, that's a lot cheaper for us, which means we can make it a lot cheaper for you. So instead of us having to charge you like an extra $100 for it, we're thinking it's going to be a lot less. It'll probably be something where we charge you. Think about the way that, like, if you've got a Netflix subscription and you want the 4K add-on, you think about the kind of upcharge they would give with that to just account for the extra bandwidth of doing it the one time. It would be a relatively modest upcharge on an archive edition to be able to get this super functionality if you wanted it, to get the really high-res downloads. But because we don't need to ship you Blu-rays all the time, we wouldn't need to charge $100 for it just to paper over the cost of our shipping. And even then, if we get, and we do have customers in Turkey, which is why I'm bitter about the shipping on that one, even then, basically it's a break even for us to ship the whole thing to you, because it's so expensive between all the production expense and the shipping to give you to ship the thing out to you if you live in a far off place like England or Turkey or so forth. I think what we're going to be doing going forward is just making it so that you can buy an archive edition, which you will either initially download it, or you'll buy it once on disc and then get all your updates as a download, from week to week basis, primarily done through Sidekick. And then, or you could also opt for the 4K version of that, the 4K archive edition, which is a little bit more, not a lot, a little bit more. and allows you to pull down 4K covers whenever we've got them. And at this point, we've got tens of thousands of them, and every time we touch a new thing, it's always done at 4K resolution. And so that would give you, if you've got a really nice monitor and you want the really best one, that would give you a way to get there. But I think we got to get out of the business of pushing quarterly update discs. It's too time intensive, it's too cost intensive, and I just don't want to. First of all, I don't want to have like 80 products, for the whole thing. We already have enough versions of ComicBase, but I don't want to have the one that's like, here's the one that includes quarterly updates. Here's the one that doesn't include quarterly updates, but it's $50 cheaper. Here's the. I don't want to have 10,000 SKUs in ComicBase. We already have some like 47 of them. It's complicated enough. I couldn't tell you our pricing thing without looking at a guide myself right now, which is why it's all done on a computer. So I'm trying to simplify the line as much as it is possible to. So, first of all, anyone who's in the audience who is looking, who has a Blu-ray or has considered it, is that a good thing or a bad thing? The idea of, make it so that 4K is, it's an add-on, essentially it's a little bit of an upgrade, charge type thing. So, I mean, if think about if an archive upgrade costs $129, maybe this costs $150. Something like that. So it's, $25-$30 more than you'd get if you wanted just the regular 4K one. Is that something that'd be interesting to you, or is it not? Do you say, no, damn it, I need my quarterly Blu-ray discs? It's crucial. I mean, what do you think? Is that a thing? Let me check comments, see if anyone thinks. John said, I like this because the usual extras, talking about movies. Agreed. Let's see here. Competent Mal, I'll get to your question in a minute about the whole thing. And Greg has a question about beer. Okay, Andre says, yes, for the media. Did you add the new path I asked for? Yes, there is now a media path in, I'm not sure if it's in ComicBase 2020, but it's definitely the next version of being able to have media on a separate thing. John says, I get the archive Blu-ray. So John, definitely interested in what your thoughts are on this one. And Andre says, I was also one of the first on Blu-ray. And then some questions about chocolate beers. So, and now we're on a chocolate beer thread. So, John and Andre, man, comments, please. Interested in your thoughts on this one. And then, looking forward a little bit. So now, okay, assuming that this is something that you guys, will either like or at least can live with, especially if we can bring the cost way down. The one thing that having a quarterly Blu-ray offers to it is the ability to always have your, let's say for some reason I hadn't been running Sidekick for a million years, and I need to catch up all at once. Well, our servers can't handle you asking for 40 gigs of, of pictures just as a request all the time. I mean, if enough people did that, we wouldn't have servers left. It would just kill us. But here's kind of a wild thought. And I guess I still don't see comments from John or Andre, because I'm like, I'm wondering whether I should even get into this, because if the answer is like, I hate the idea, Bickford, what are you thinking? I'm going to bravely go forward. All right. Okay, Steve says, I'd be interested in the quarterly updates were a pain, so I stopped. Cool. That works great for me. All right, so here's a thought. What if, in a world where most of your content is downloaded anyway, and think about the Netflix app itself. So if any of you guys bought a TV or a game console or something like that in the last 5 years, it came with a bunch of apps on it. One of them was, say, Netflix or Hulu or Vudu or one of those right now. Now, that app, it comes with a bunch of graphics built into it, right? It's a certain size for the program code to make the app work. But it didn't come with every graphic of every movie you're looking at. By the way, one thing that you guys may or may not know, if you actually have a Blu-ray movie, when it's first loading up, a lot of what it's doing when it's loading up is not just spinning the disc up. It's actually going out to a server and finding the latest movie previews it wants to stream to you, which is why your movie previews always seem, for a 10-year-old Blu-ray disc, always seem suspiciously current. Unless it can't connect to the server, in which case you've got the old ones, advertising X-Men First Class. But anyway, they had the idea built into the media itself that we should always be connecting to a server to try to download new stuff. Well, all right, look at the Netflix as an app, right? It's, I don't know, a couple hundred, a couple hundred K or megs or whatever else. It's a relatively small thing, but every time you launch it, the very first time you launch it on a new TV especially, it goes out and says, well, all right, what are all the new releases? What are all the hot movies? What are all the things we want to, pimp for different categories? And it downloads just a ton of new content, all those thumbnails, all those little, previews it shows for everything. And it's constantly refreshing all that stuff with new stuff as it comes out. So, it's a relatively small app that's pulling down incredible amounts of content in real time, and most of the time you don't know it's even doing the downloading because it just kind of does it when you're not looking. Well, what if? The model on a ComicBase archive has always been, we're going to put all the pictures on the disk so that anytime you want to print a label, you want to print a report, you want to browse between titles, you want to do all that stuff, that you've always got a photo reference to work from if we've ever seen the picture at all. All right, now, I still absolutely adore the idea of anytime I launch ComicBase Archive Edition, let's say on a brand new machine, that if I start just typing, AMAZ, I'm going to Amazing Adventures, Amazing Fantasy, Amazing Worlds, I'm seeing all the covers fly by for the different titles. So the second I see the one that's the right title, it's there. But you think about it, the cover I'm actually showing right there, we only show a little tiny cover about that big. Now we're taking it in real time from a very big cover from the #1 image of that one in order to squish it down and show it to you. But if we say what's all the only data we needed, right? Just needed, we only need a picture that big to let you navigate the titles, at least initially. Now when you go to a title, there's actually this, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit, relatively clever caching algorithm we do, which first of all checks to say, have you ever been to this title before? In other words, have we ever scanned your pictures folder to see what you've got? If it hasn't, it quickly figures out, have you got a picture at all? It draws a little tiny placeholder thumbnail to say, yeah, there's a picture here. And immediately something starts spinning in the upper corner, upper left corner as it scans, and it builds thumbnails for every picture in that folder. It builds thumbnails at the size that you want to display in the grid. So again, even though you might have, I don't know, 50 megabytes worth of, or maybe more if you're looking at a title like Action Comics, you might have, a gigabyte of photos, sitting in there at 4K resolution. If you set your cover thumbnail size to 48K, it only needs, first of all, in order to populate that grid and show you what all the covers look like, it only needs to find the 48K, the 48 pixel wide thumbnail to show each element in the grid until you click on it. When you click on it, it goes to the original file, shows you a much bigger version, and if you click on the picture directly, it then shows you the full version. So you've got all these things here, but most of the time we're only ever referencing this very small cache thumbnail. And the first time you built them, we don't need to go back and look for them again. We've already built the thumbnail, and so it's the very first time you go to a title, it's pretty slow as it builds all the little things as it goes down, but the next time you go back to it, it's super fast. All right, what if we took the idea even further, right? What if, when you first download the Archive Edition, all we installed, was, say, Marvel, DC, and all the #1 images for every other title? What if that's all that got installed to start with? And again, we could, first of all, fit this on less disks if we wanted to. We could maybe even fit it on 1 or 2 disks. But then, every single time you went to a title, in real time, it went out and said, okay, he's got 50 rows showing on his screen. Give me the first 50 pictures. And our server started kicking those back to you just as you went to the title. And when you weren't doing anything else, so when your computer was idle and you were just looking at a title and doing other things, it was just pulling down all the other thumbnails from our servers as you went through the through the database. So remember earlier we talked about, like, there's 685,000 covers in ComicBase right now. I work on this thing every day of my life. I'm never going to see all the pictures that are in ComicBase because I haven't got 8 days to do nothing 24 hours a day but cycle through pictures 1 per second. So there are probably a couple 300,000 pictures in ComicBase I have never myself personally laid eyes on, and this is my full-time job. So let's say you're a regular guy as opposed to a mutant like me who collects, does comic software for a living. There's every chance in the world that if you just went to the comics you care about, and again, we can guess Marvel and DC, we can preload the guess a little bit and load those up. But if you just went to the comics you care about, let's say you're a Dark Horse collector, I want to go to Star Wars Crimson Empire. If the very first time you went to Crimson Empire, it very rapidly pulled down all the thumbnails, and then when you weren't looking, it pulled down the higher resolution versions of that one, so that when you clicked on one, and if we even had a higher resolution version, it showed you the higher res one, but until 3 seconds before you clicked on it, that wasn't even on your machine, right? At that point, we could probably, if we were really clever, give you a way that it feels really fast to get around the whole thing, but you never actually have to install almost anything. Like maybe you install the initial disk, maybe you install 2 disks, and after that, maybe you just use the program and it downloads everything as it goes. And if we could pace that out such that everyone wasn't, trying to download everything all at the same time, again, if we're really clever, maybe we could make it so that we could serve up the entire ComicBase user population in a way that we could really give everyone really just the pictures they need as they need them, and not make them go to a lot of trouble of downloading anything themselves. Thoughts? Good? Bad? Overly optimistic? What do you think? I'm going to put my eyeglasses on and check the comments. All right. John says, I'm old school, like physical copy of my stuff. I could live with digital downloads if I had to. When the AI overloads take over, they can't take my CB away. Totes agree with you. I do think, at the very minimum, you always ought to be able to download the main software, no doubt. And once it's on your machine, it's on your machine. We are not ever taking anything away from the whole thing. All right. Okay. Andre says, love you for the path. Yes, for the download. Think the people who think at the people who wants physical media once a year way more easier for you. I think I understand what you're saying there. Okay. Understood. Or you can download my copy. Okay. Thumbs and thumbs for the rest as reference. Scott says, like the idea. For those of you and anyone who stumbles on this live stream later on, if you could chew on this one a little bit and think it over, please send me comments either in the stream for the chat or directly to P. Bickford. I'm going to put my Chiron on the screen here if I go back to it. Right there. That should be my email address shown on the screen right now. Send me a note. I really want to know your thoughts on this one, because it's not something that we're going to go full tilt boogie with in the next version, but I'll be honest, I've done some thinking about it, and I want to have a way to make it so that we can give everyone all the stuff you need when you need it without blowing you away having to install the universe onto your machine. So this could be kind of interesting. I mean, I do like the idea, especially of the idea that, like when I buy a brand new TV, it comes loaded with like the basic, hardware to get me going very quickly, but then it gets smarter as I use it and starts downloading the things I like as, like if I start streaming a bunch of horror movies around Halloween, I turn on my TV and suddenly it's comes built in and it's showing me all these previews of all the horror movies that are streaming on whatever service I'm looking at and everything. But those things weren't loaded onto my machine until I started watching horror movies. But then as soon as I turn on my TV the next time, they're just sitting there waiting for me and they're ready to go. If we could do the same thing with comic covers, I think that'd be pretty cool. And as a bonus, it would allow us to take down the footprint of ComicBase, even just as an install. I mean, let alone just the problem of us being able to distribute all that stuff. But it would also make it so that if let's say you just collect, I'm a Marvel guy, right? So let's say you just collect Marvel and maybe a couple other things. Well, the only pictures you'd ever have on your machine, other than the ones that let you quickly move from title to title, would be from the Marvel titles you collect. And we could probably also, if we had the idea of it automatically goes looking for pictures that you didn't have, we could also probably have it so you don't need to generally ever hit download cover manually yourself. It would just automatically do it as you were looking at stuff. I like the idea. It is a little bit aspirational for me, and honestly I'd feel a lot better about it if we had a 1 gigabyte pipe up. going on right now, because then I know we'd be able to pull this off. But it strikes me as something that I'd be interested in at least stress testing a little bit to see if we could pull it off. Because technically, it's not the hardest thing that we've done lately in order to do something like this. The thing I got to do is I got to make sure I can serve the whole thing up to thousands and thousands of people who are also wanting to do crazy things at the same time, downloading Blu-ray disc images from across town or uploading massive databases without bringing all our servers to a halt. Because you can never bring the servers to a halt, because otherwise bad things happen. Anyway, so let's know what you think. Aaron says, especially nowadays, download's the way to go. John says, seems interesting. Audrey said, I sent you an email, you never responded. I'm sorry if so. Resend it to me, and I'll try to get back to you. Sorry, I get a lot of email, man. I don't know what you're referring to at the moment, but you send it to me again, and I will try to respond. I will look for that. P says, when did Pete put the castle on his desk? It wasn't always there. Yes, this is the, if you guys can see it, that was what I spent about a week and a half, well, yeah, on and off. This is the Lego Haunted House kit that I spent building around Halloween. So, pretty cool. I dig this one a lot. It even comes with, lighting effects somewhere in here. Yes, the manor here. It's got that guy. This is an elevator of doom. You can hook a motor kit up to it. It will drop the people in the whole thing. It's like a Tower of Terror kind of deal and so forth. But yeah, this was my Halloween centerpiece I made for the whole thing, and I haven't found a place to put it away yet, so that's why it's still on my desk. If you want to get that one, you have to go directly to the Lego shop, I believe, lego.com, because it was one of these weird little limited release things. I don't think, unless there's a Lego store near you, I don't think you're going to see it in the stores too much. It was like 3,500 pieces. It's a big kit. All right, one of the issues I had backs the hard drive on my PC is partitioned to CDE. Once you start getting full, so remove the ComicBase covers to a different drive. That should work just fine now. And another thing about this is, as Andre mentioned, in Crystal Palace, the next version of ComicBase, there's also the ability to move your media directory as well to whatever drive you want, and that should work just fine. You do that under File, Manage Pictures and Movies. Greg reminds about the forum. User on my part. Now I download just the images I need. That's fine too. Okay. All right. Now, let's see here. Okay, ComicBase T. For mega updates, what about setting up a queue and just transferring several hundred megabytes a day and doing the sections that are most needed? I gotta think about it. See, I mean, I think what the trick is going to be, and if you look at the way that, say, video games work, man, they call them optimizations, but man, video games are the biggest cheaters on the planet in terms of stretching what you think you see versus what you're actually seeing. In other words, it starts with basics like, for instance, you won't, this is technology that's 15 years old at this point, is that, like, until you get very close to a background, they won't even load the more detailed version of it into memory. They'll be showing you, like, a low-res pixelated version if it's going to be way off in the distance. Video gaming is all about how do you cheat the user's perception, so it always feels very fluid, but you're always moving the minimal amount of data down the pipe you can possibly get away with. When you look at the actual workings of ComicBase, right, the illusion, and it's actually a reality, is that you've always got all the higher res versions available to you all the time as soon as you want to get to them. But if we were cool, right, and if this was important to us, and it's starting to get important because it's starting to get very hard to install everything at high res, or at least the res we want to for everyone right from the get-go. When you think about it, all we really need is the stuff that you access quickly to be there already. So that means, like, the title thumbnails to let you navigate between all the titles. Those have to be in the initial install. But think about it, those things don't need to be this big. They could be this big, right? Because that's all you see anyway, right? Matter of fact, it would even make the whole thing run faster, because instead of taking a big one, shrinking it down, and then showing you that and repeat for every keystroke you do, we could just show you the little one to start with, right? When you go to a grid, go to a new title, and you say, like, I'm going to Action Comics for the first time, right? Well, it's going to show you the thumbnails. It's going to go to your list of Action Comics, go to every large file, make a little thumbnail, store the little thumbnail for here's issue number 1, here's issue number 2, here's issue number 3. Actually, it starts with issue number 0 if we're talking about action, right? Um, but it does all that work, but all it really shows you is the thumbnails. Well, what if the very first time you went to Action Comics had no pictures on your disc except for the little thumbnail of issue number 1, but the second you went to that title, it instantly had pulled down the first 50 thumbnails, show those to you, started downloading the rest of those, and the second you started clicking on any particular one of them, it downloaded that particular issue and showed you that one. If it could do that in the same half second that we're doing right now to say show you the graph from Atomic Avenue of how much everything sells, that might be pretty cool. And also, if I could do things like saying, hey, this guy went to Action Comics and Batman and Detective and these other things, so mark those guys as in queue. So when you get a moment, when he's sitting there entering his, Man of Steel comics or something, and you've got some time on your hands, start filling in the high-res versions of all those titles, but only those titles. That's well within our capabilities. And like I say, if we pull it off the trick pretty well, it might be something where, like, the very first time you launch ComicBase, a little sluggish showing you the first title, and after that it runs pretty darn fast. That might be about where it goes if we're clever about how we do the job. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, because if we pull it off, it lets you have less stuff taken up on your disk. It lets everything feel like it runs really fast, and every time you want a high-res image, it's always just sitting there, ready for you. But until that time, you haven't spent a lot of disks, time installing anything. Yeah, for that matter, you practically need to install nothing, and you don't need to. You don't need to worry about manually downloading covers. You don't need to worry about all this stuff. It would just automatically do everything for you. It's a cool thought. So I'd be curious what people think. Greg says, saw the box in the bottom shelf. Oh, yeah, you probably did. Okay, so Scott says attempting to get external drive for the purpose of storing all the covers. Makes completely sense. Oh, and the Lego box or Eagle Moss box. Everyone's asking about that. Man, by the way, if you guys are wondering about the Eagle Moss graphic novels, I am still waiting. It's been a month now. I've got, I think, 6 or 7 prompts into their shipping department. I'm like, guys, are you gonna, reimburse me the $114 it's gonna take to ship these back to you, or do I give them out on my show? And they're like, no, don't give them out on your show. Well, so, we're still waiting for management to, say that we're gonna, pay you back for shipping them to us. I'm like, guys, it's time to make a decision. It really is. Just spoke to them again today. But anyway, I'm trying to angle for them to allow me to give away the Eagle Moss graphic novels as giveaways to people who watch the podcast. So for what's worth, I'm trying, guys. All right. I'm guessing that Pete puts those on AA one day. There are a few up there right now. I haven't put the whole thing up there. But one thing I did do is, remember I pointed you guys to that Zavvi sale where they had them like 3 for 15 pounds. Or at one point I think there were 5. I think it was 5 for 15 pounds. So they were £3 each. And I think I want to say I even found for a day or two they were running for them even less than that. It was like 10 for 15 pounds or something like that. So it wound up being like $2-3 per graphic novel hardcover. Anyway, I went and bought like 2 or 3 different like sampler packs they had going up there, which Zavvi often does a thing with DC graphic novels where, like, oh yeah, it's 10 different DC mystery graphic novels for 15 pounds, so call it $20, and those wound up being, turns out, more graphic novels from Eagle Moss. So I have some extras, and they're up on Atomic Avenue, so feel free to grab those. But I'm seeing what I can do on the others. Predictive caching, indeed. Sounds good. All right. What if an SSD, putting covers up is okay, but the media SSD is not that big? So Scott asks, all right, so if I have an SSD and I'm trying to put cover on it, it's okay, but the media SSD is not that big. That sounds perfect, because in the next version of ComicBase, you'll be able to put the media on a separate drive. So if you have deep media, movies, things like that, you can just store them on your big, deep, slow drive, because they don't need to be you don't hit them that frequently, so they don't need to be all that fast. But the thumbnails in particular, you really want those things to be on your SSD if you've got one. Okay, Grace, CB's live stream plot over the fate of the Eagle Box boss. Absolutely. All right. So guys, it's been a while. I think we're at time. So I have one other thing I got to show you because we had Greg sent me a request, and I want to honor this one if I possibly can. How to upload your comic collection on the app to the Android phone. All right. So here is how you sync your stuff together. So first of all right, here's my live stream copy of Pete's Comics right here. And let me go ahead and switch to this screen. And all right, so ignore all the other foo on this thing, including Deus Ex, which, by the way, is a great damn shooter. All right, so let's move this other foo off of here so it's not in the way. All right, cool. All right, so here's our live stream copy of my fictional database right here, right? Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to exit. So why did I bother showing it to you? Because the important part I want to show here, and by the way, you see this part where it says updating totals down in the corner here? Oh, that is hard to see. But anyway, this bit right here, this goes away in Crystal Palace, so you're welcome. Anyway, so in the next version of ComicBase, this won't be a thing. So ignore this for the moment because it's going away anyway. All right. So what you do want to do, on the other hand, is you want to go to ComicBase Sidekick. So the way to get to Sidekick, go down to your bottom right-hand corner down here, and you'll probably see a little up arrow pointing up right here. All right. Click on this arrow. It's a left click. Look for the little superhero guy right down there. That's Sidekick. Now, right-click on him. I don't make up the right-click, left-click thing so much. This is done by convention for Windows. Matter of fact, I think we even gimmick it so if you want to left-click it, it works anyway. But anyway, that's just so you know, that's how these are called notification area programs. That's how they all work. It's always left-click to bring them up, right-click to use them. All right, so go ahead and choose Open. This brings up your list of stuff. All right, so here's the live stream ComicBase database. Couple things. All right, if I just want to say, you know, get my stats on this up to my app on my mobile phone, all I have to do is do a check for new sales and purchases. In that 1 second it took me just now, it actually sent the specs on this database up to the server. So if I go on the mobile app right now, you'd see an entry for Livestream Pete's Comics, and you'd see how much this, how much my collection was worth and so forth. It would be right there at the top. Even just doing a check for new sales purchases does it right away. Now all the others, the longer ones will do it as well. But if you just want to do a quick update of all your stuff, that's the quickest thing you can do just to force an update up on the server. What you really want to do though to update your data though is you want to go and save your stuff to the cloud. Now before you do that, here's a tip. Go up here to the gear, this icon in the upper right-hand corner here, and scroll over here to the Save to Cloud tab and set a couple of preferences. What I would do is have it automatically generate a collection overview and a collection report. And if you want to say add wanted issues to your Atomic Avenue wish list, also a good idea. It'll help you find things if they come up, for sale on Atomic Avenue. But anyway, automatically have it generate these reports. What that does is whenever you back up your database on ComicBase.com, it will automatically tell our backend servers to look through your database and automatically make these reports for you so that they're waiting for you whenever you go from the app to use them. All right, so go ahead and hit save then. And then if you do a save now, all you got to do, it'll compress your database, send it to the cloud. Within about half an hour, our backend server will have chewed through your database, built whatever reports you want, and you'll be able to see them in the app. So that's pretty much the whole story on that one. If you have any trouble with it, please get in touch with me either at the email that I flashed earlier or just at support@comicbase.com, or just give us a call, 615-408-266-6883, and we will help you out over the phone. Not that rough, but the main trick there is just keep in mind what you're really doing when you're using the app is you're looking at a report from your collection. The thing that syncs everything together is Sidekick. So you're doing all your database management in your database on ComicBase.com. I'm sorry, not on ComicBase.com, on your local machine. Sidekick will push that up to our servers so that we know what you've got and what the reports look like. Your app can then view those reports, and see what you had. And if you want to, that app will also let you take pictures of comic books and, barcodes and such, add them to, to a kind of a queue for processing, to say, hey, I just bought this comic or whatever else. And then the next time you launch ComicBase down on your desktop, it'll say, oh, hey, I noticed you bought the following 12 comic books. You want me to add them to your collection? That then gets rolled back into your database on your local machine, right? Because everything is on your local machine unless you share it with us. Because you're not doing your work on our servers. You're doing your work on your local machine. You're syncing it to the servers just so you can view everything everywhere. Because just philosophically, we really have the idea that your data is your data. It's not your data as long as you keep on paying us a subscription, which is pretty much, that's part of the deal whenever you're in a subscription service. Is the second you stop buying the subscription, they say, well, I guess you can't get to your data anymore. That's not a thing we ever want to do. So that's why your data lives on your machine. You can sync it to the server as long as your subscription's good. but if you ever stop buying our subscription, your data's still on your machine. It didn't go anywhere. Anyway, so that's how all that works. If you have further questions, please get in touch. All right, guys, I'm going to do a quick check of the chat, and then I think we're going to wrap. All right. John says, cover art's small, but when you add ebook, PDF, or CRC, it is big. Yeah, that's true. So that's another good reason why you want to take advantage of, it might have been Andre's suggestion, to have the separate media folder, and that's something as part of the new version that will be coming out shortly. All right, guys, have a good one. Thank you for joining us, and I will see everyone next time, and stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.